In this module, Tony, let's talk about the phases of business continuity, right? A lot of people, this might be a refresher for some, but it might be new for others. So let's take a few minutes and let's talk about this slide.
So this is the business continuity life cycle. And again, the life cycle is that it never stops developing. If you do not look at it as a life cycle, what you're going to get is you're going to get a product and then it's just going to sit on a shelf. So risk assessment, basically be able to collect information and assign values for the risks associated with priorities, developing and comparing information, and also information that'll be used for decision making. One of the things that I think is critical in this phase is to engage different levels of a corporation. If you just engage the C-suite in this conversation to identify risk, there's an opportunity that some of the processes that are closer to some of the deliverables of a corporation are going to be missed. And I think that when you engage uh, all levels of an organization, you clearly understand exactly what they feel the risks are. And I think it's an eye-opening experience for different levels to understand what others are dealing with. The business impact analysis, the method of identifying the consequences of failing to perform a function or requirement, being able to identify what the impact is of not having maybe information available or not having a particular piece of equipment available. What's your, what can you do? What's your, the maximum amount of time you can um, keep delivering your deliverables without having that functioning before bad things start happening in your process. Strategy plan and development, we spoke to this already. Being able to make sure that when you do come up with the risk assessment, it's been done. You have the business impact analysis. You understand what are the risks and what's the impact to a corporation or to an entity. Being able to put together the strategy and the plan development so that it is something that can start being worked on. If you don't have this, again, the chances are it's just going to sit on a shelf and it's never going to come to fruition. And then to test, train, and maintain. It's just like an exercise. You develop the exercise, but you have to test, you have to train, and you have to maintain that. As I gave as an example, just think of the priority of what was a risk in um, 2000 versus 2001 after 9/11. The fact was is that there was a whole new set of risks that we were all faced with. Same thing between 2019 and 2020. The fact is that now with COVID virus, now you're starting to see people go back, look at their plans, and figure out how they can put pandemic planning back into their plans or into their plans for the first time. But being able to test and train, individuals have to be confident that if they're called upon to be able to execute the business continuity plan, it can't be new to them. It's got to be something they're familiar with. They've got to know what the capabilities, they've got to know whose roles and what responsibilities they have. And then they also have to make sure that you put in people's availability. For instance, if you have something that's a critical function and you have one person assigned and trained, what happened if that person is not available? So being able to have a plan that you've tested so somebody else can stay in there and keep the life cycle going. And then after you've got that plan, you've tested it, maintain it, obviously you're going to get feedback. And just like anything else, it goes back into identifying the risk and you just continuous improvement throughout this process.
So, Tony, I want to drill into this for just a minute so people can get an idea. Can you give us, let's take risk assessment. Can you give us a use case or an example of what that looks like? This may be something some people that take this already know, but I wanted, if we can, to give them kind of a walkthrough of an example or a case study where a risk assessment, some of these can get very complicated, right? I mean, you can, I mean, you can spend weeks just on some of this. But I was curious if you had some example or a case study that you're give people an idea of when you do a risk assessment. What are the steps that you would take or you would encourage someone to start with and take and kind of walk through that with us, if you can?
Yeah, thanks. It all has to do with research, research of the facility of a company, and then also the interviewing process. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes we can be so attracted to the buzzwords of an industry that we overlook some of the obvious. And in one example, I think of a facility, it was a chemical facility, and what they They